Welcome to my channel Coinology. In the world of coin collecting, there are certain moments when a seemingly ordinary object turns out to be something extraordinary, and one of the most fascinating examples of this is the story of the 1982 1-cent coin from the United States. Imagine holding a simple penny in your hand, a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up from the sidewalk, and realizing that it could be worth not just a few dollars or even a few thousand, but an absolutely mind-blowing $271 million. It sounds like something out of a movie, like a hidden treasure that slipped past countless eyes over the decades, but in the numismatic world, the world of coin collectors, these stories are real, and they are the reason so many people keep checking their change, their jars of old coins, and even the dusty boxes hidden away in their attics. The 1982 1-cent coin is not just another date in the long history of American coinage. It is a coin that marks a turning point, a transition year, a year that produced varieties, errors, and mysteries that still capture the imagination of collectors to this day. And because of that, its potential value can skyrocket under the right circumstances. But before we get to why a single example of this coin could reach a staggering $271 million in market value, let's slow down and step into the history, the design, the technical details, and the reasons this humble penny has become a legend. Back in the early 1980s, the U.S. Mint faced a problem that might sound small but was actually huge from a production standpoint. The price of copper was rising, and the cost to make a single 1-cent coin was getting dangerously close to, and sometimes even exceeding, the coin's own face value. That's not something the mint could just ignore. For over a century, the penny had been made mostly of copper, specifically 95% copper, with the rest being a mixture of tin and zinc. This gave the coin its distinctive reddish tone, its pleasant weight in the hand, and its resistance to corrosion. But economics have a way of forcing change, and in 1982, the mint made one of the most significant compositional changes in modern coinage history. Early in the year, pennies were still being struck in the traditional copper alloy, but by mid-year, a new version rolled off the presses. Instead of being made almost entirely of copper, these new pennies were composed of 97.5% zinc with just a thin copper plating on the outside to maintain their familiar color. This change reduced the weight from the old 3.11 grams to the lighter 2.5 grams. It was a cost-cutting measure, pure and simple, but it also created an unusual situation: two different metal compositions for the same date and design, both circulating at the same time. Now, this is where things get interesting. Collectors today know that 1982 wasn't just a year with two compositions, it was also a year with multiple varieties. You had large date and small date versions from different mints, you had copper and zinc versions, and you had differences in how the numbers and the date appeared. That means there are actually 7 recognized varieties of the 1982 Lincoln cent, and if you know what to look for, some of them can be far more valuable than others. But even beyond the recognized varieties, there are rare transitional errors, coins struck in the wrong metal for that part of the year, coins with doubled dies, and coins that somehow escape the minting process with unique characteristics that make them one of a kind. And when a coin is truly unique, the potential value can reach astronomical figures, because wealthy collectors will bid against each other for the privilege of owning something no one else on the planet has. Picture this: somewhere in a private collection, there's a 1982 penny that is unlike any other. Maybe it's a perfect, high-grade uncirculated coin with a composition error, maybe it's a proof quality strike made in the wrong metal, maybe it's a mint error so dramatic that it defies the usual categories. The rarity is absolute: only one exists, or perhaps only a handful exist, and among them, one example is the finest known. When such a coin hits the auction block, the price can go from impressive to jaw-dropping in the blink of an eye. And that's where the $271 million figure comes in. That's not the value of every 1982 penny you might find in your change, it's the theoretical market value of the single most unique, desirable specimen of this coin, the one that would ignite a bidding war among the richest collectors in the world. If you think that's far-fetched, consider that rare coins have sold for tens of millions of dollars before, and the allure of a once-in-a-lifetime treasure can push prices to heights no one would have predicted. But let's step back for a moment and think about what a penny means in everyday life. For most people, it's almost invisible. We toss it in jars, we ignore it on the ground, we think of it as barely worth our time. Yet every single penny has a history: it was designed, it was struck, it passed through countless hands, it survived years or decades of circulation. The 1982 penny carries not just the image of Abraham Lincoln on its obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on its reverse, but the story of a nation making a quiet but significant change in its coinage. The obverse, with Lincoln's profile facing right, bears the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust, as well as the date and mint mark. The reverse, designed by Frank Gasparo, shows the Lincoln Memorial in fine detail, with the tiny statue of Lincoln visible between the columns if you look closely enough. Above it, the words United States of America, below, the denomination 1 cent, and in the center, the national motto E pluribus unum. For decades, this was the familiar face of the penny, and in 1982, it appeared on both the copper and zinc versions. The difference in weight between these two types might seem trivial, 3.11 grams versus 2.5 grams, but it's a key identifier for collectors. You can actually tell which type you have by simply weighing it on a small digital scale. And while millions upon millions of each type were made, the unique combinations of errors and varieties mean that some are vastly more valuable than others. Imagine finding a coin that looks just like all the rest, but when you weigh it and research it, you realize it's one of the rarest varieties ever struck. That moment of discovery is what keeps treasure hunters and coin enthusiasts going year after year. And with the 1982 penny, that possibility is very real. Even circulated examples of certain varieties can sell for significant sums, and high-grade or error coins can command life-changing amounts. The market for rare coins is a fascinating blend of history, art, economics, and human passion. Prices are not just about metal content, they're about rarity, condition, historical significance, and collector demand. When all of those factors align, a coin's value can leap from pocket change to a fortune. And in the case of the most exceptional 1982 penny, the one that could theoretically sell for $271 million, those factors align in a way that's almost mythical. It would be a coin that is not just rare, but singular, not just valuable, but priceless to the right person. It would be a tangible link to a pivotal moment in U.S. coinage, a piece of metal that carries within it a story worth telling, retelling, and preserving for generations. When you think about the year 1982, it was a time of change in many ways, not just for coins but for the world at large. In the United States, technology was beginning to take bigger steps forward, culture was shifting, and economics were forcing both large corporations and government institutions to adapt to new realities. The U.S. Mint was no exception. The change from copper to zinc in the penny was not something they did lightly, it was a decision born from months of testing, planning, and careful consideration. The rising price of copper was not just a small bump, it was a consistent trend that threatened to make the penny a losing proposition financially. Imagine producing millions upon millions of coins every year and knowing that each one might actually cost more than it was worth to make. That's not a sustainable path, and so the transition to a copper-plated zinc planchet became the logical, if somewhat controversial, choice. Collectors at the time may not have realized it, but they were witnessing the creation of a future treasure hunt. The thing about transitional years in coinage is that they often create confusion, and confusion is fertile ground for mistakes. In 1982, with both copper and zinc pennies being produced, planchets, those small metal discs that are struck into coins, could easily end up in the wrong production run. That means a few early-year copper planchets might have been struck later than they should have been, and a few zinc planchets might have been struck earlier than expected. Such mismatches are exactly what give rise to the rare and coveted transitional error coins. A copper penny from late 1982, for example, might be one of only a handful known, and its rarity can make it worth thousands, or in the case of the most extraordinary examples, hundreds of thousands, even millions. But when you pair such rarity with other factors like perfect condition, unique doubling in the design, or historical significance, that's when you step into the territory of astronomical values. Collectors often say that a coin story is just as important as its physical condition. The 1982 penny story is rich with intrigue because of the sheer number of varieties produced in a single year. There were large dates and small dates from both Philadelphia and Denver, each in copper and zinc. That already makes for 7 different standard varieties, but then you add in the errors, off-center strikes, double strikes, broad strikes, misaligned dies, and transitional composition errors, and suddenly you have a web of possibilities that can keep even seasoned collectors excited. Every single example found in the wild is like a little puzzle to solve. Is it copper or zinc? Is it a large date or small date? Does it have any striking errors? What's the condition? Could it be something so rare that it changes your life? In the case of the coin valued at $271 million, you are looking at a perfect storm of rarity, desirability, and provenance. This would not be just any mint error, it would be an error so spectacular and so unique that its fame would spread beyond the coin collecting world into mainstream media. Wealthy collectors are often willing to spend vast sums on trophies, objects that signify not just ownership but status. In art, we've seen paintings sell for hundreds of millions of dollars, not because the materials are worth that much, but because the object itself is irreplaceable. The same principle applies here. If the most exceptional 1982 penny ever struck came to auction, it would not be bought simply for its metal or even for its historical interest, it would be bought as a statement piece, a crown jewel in a world-class collection. And in such cases, there is no real ceiling for the price. The thought that a single penny could hold that much value is mind-bending. It challenges the way we think about money itself. After all, money is supposed to be a measure of value, yet here we have a situation where the symbol of 1 cent could be exchanged for hundreds of millions of dollars. This paradox is one of the reasons rare coins capture the imagination so strongly. They blur the line between everyday objects and priceless artifacts. And for the collector who holds that unique 1982 penny, the story is just as valuable as the coin itself. The knowledge that something so small and so humble has achieved such a monumental place in the numismatic world, beyond the specifics of composition and rarity, there's also something deeply appealing about the design of the Lincoln cent. Abraham Lincoln's profile, based on the sculpting work of Victor David Brenner, has graced the obverse of the penny since 1909, making it the longest running coin design in U.S. history. In 1982, that tradition was still strong. The Lincoln Memorial Reverse, introduced in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, was still in use, with Frank Gasparo's engraving showing remarkable detail in such a small space. You could see the columns, the steps, and even the tiny seated statue of Lincoln between the central pillars, a tribute within a tribute. To collectors, these details matter. They are not just decoration, they are a connection to history, a piece of artistry preserved in metal. When we talk about weight, the numbers 3.11 grams for copper, 2.5 grams for zinc may seem small, but to a trained hand, the difference is noticeable. The feel of the coin in your palm, the sound it makes when dropped on a hard surface, the way it reacts under magnification, these are the subtle clues that separate ordinary coins from extraordinary ones. In a time before affordable precision scales were common in households, collectors would often go by feel and sound alone to identify copper versus zinc pennies. Today, with a simple digital scale, anyone can check their change for these differences, and the thrill of possibly finding a rare variety keeps people searching. And then there is the question of market dynamics. Why would anyone pay such a massive sum for a penny? The answer lies in the psychology of collecting. For high-end collectors, especially those with vast resources, it's not about the face value, it's about the story, the exclusivity, and the bragging rights. To own the only example of a coin that everyone else is hunting for is to achieve a kind of immortality in the collecting community. Your name becomes forever tied to that coin in auction records, articles, and numismatic history. The $271 million price tag would not be a reflection of practical value, it would be a reflection of desire, prestige, and the unstoppable force of competition when two or more determined collectors set their sights on the same treasure. When you imagine the path of a single coin from the moment it leaves the U.S. Mint to the moment it ends up in the hands of a collector or investor, you realize it's a journey filled with countless twists, coincidences, and moments where fate could have taken a completely different turn. A 1982 penny, freshly struck and gleaming under the fluorescent lights of the production floor, would have tumbled down into bins along with thousands of others. At that moment, there would have been nothing to indicate that it was any different from the rest. From there, it might have been rolled into paper wrappers by automated machines, loaded into armored trucks, and sent to banks across the country. It could have been withdrawn by a customer, placed in a cash register, given as change to a shopper, and then carried away in a pocket without anyone giving it a second thought. Yet somewhere along the line, the coin in our story diverged from the normal path, not because it wanted to, but because it was fundamentally different, whether by composition, by striking error, or by a combination of factors that made it unique. Perhaps it found its way into a small town where it passed quietly through transactions for years, rubbing against countless other coins, acquiring the faint scratches and marks of circulation, and yet still retaining enough detail to reveal its secret to the trained eye. Or perhaps it never circulated at all, perhaps it was pulled from the bank by a careful coin roll hunter, someone who opened a wrapper, noticed something unusual in the color or luster, and set it aside without yet realizing just how special it was. These moments happen quietly, and yet they change the destiny of a coin forever. The rarity that will one day drive its value into the hundreds of millions lies dormant until someone recognizes it. The recognition stage is often where the true adventure begins. A collector sits at a table with a magnifying glass, carefully inspecting each coin in a batch. They look for doubling in the lettering, for unusual spacing in the date, for the telltale difference in metal composition. In the case of the 1982 penny, they weigh it, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of curiosity, and notice the reading on the scale doesn't match what it should be for that particular variety. This single moment of surprise can send a rush of excitement through the veins, the same rush a gold prospector might have felt upon seeing the glint of metal in a pan of dirt. They double-check the reading, inspect the edges, examine the color under different lighting. Everything aligns: the variety, the composition, the date, and the unique features. They have found something no one else has, and now the decision-making begins. Do they keep it a secret for now, quietly seeking expert opinions to confirm what they've found? Do they submit it to a grading service like PCGS or NGC, where professionals will examine it under microscopes, verify its authenticity, and assign it a grade that could make or break its market value? The grading process itself is a tense period for any collector. You send away your treasure, trusting it will be handled carefully, waiting days or weeks for the results, and imagining all the possible outcomes. When the package finally returns and the label reads not just the grade but also the words unique variety or transitional error, one of a kind, the feeling is indescribable. At that moment, the coin steps out of obscurity and into history. The next phase is bringing it to the market. This isn't something that happens at an ordinary flea market or a casual coin show. A coin of this magnitude requires the stage of a major auction house, Heritage Auctions, Stacksbowers, or Sotheby's, places where the wealthiest collectors in the world gather, either in person or through private bidding networks. The auction house will produce glossy catalogs with high-resolution photographs, detailed descriptions of the coin's features, and historical context to drive interest. They will send out press releases to numismatic media, and sometimes even mainstream outlets will pick up the story: rare 1982 penny expected to shatter records at upcoming auction. This publicity fuels the anticipation, and with anticipation comes competition. When the auction day arrives, the room is filled with tension. Some bidders are present in person, dressed in suits, their expressions carefully neutral as they sit with numbered paddles in hand. Others are on phones, with auction representatives relaying their bids in whispers. Still others are online, watching the livestream and clicking the bid button in real time. The opening bid might already be in the millions, reflecting the pre-auction estimates and the knowledge that this coin is truly unique. As the auctioneer calls out the bids, the numbers climb: 5 million, 10 million, 50 million. The room is electric. At each new high, a murmur runs through the crowd. Some bidders drop out as the numbers surpass their comfort zones, but the true heavyweights remain, locked in a duel that is as much about pride and legacy as it is about money. Eventually, the bids reach 9 figures. This is uncharted territory for a penny, and yet no one is surprised, not in this room, not for this coin. The figure jumps past $200 million, then $250 million. The increments slow, the tension builds, and the auctioneer's voice sharpens as they seek the final bid. $271 million, a representative announces for their client on the phone. Silence follows. The auctioneer scans the room, counts down, and brings the gavel down with a decisive bang. Sold. The room erupts into applause, not just for the staggering price but for the drama of the moment. The coin has entered a new chapter in its life, one where it is not merely a piece of metal but a legend in its own right. After the auction, the story spreads across news outlets around the world. Headlines proclaim the sale of the $271 million penny, and suddenly, the 1982 1-cent coin is not just a niche topic for collectors, it's a household phrase. People everywhere start checking their pennies again, wondering if they, too, might have a fortune hiding in plain sight. For the new owner, the coin is more than an investment, it's a symbol of victory, of prestige, and perhaps of a lifelong passion for collecting. For the seller, it is a life-changing windfall, the culmination of years of patience, knowledge, and maybe a bit of luck, and yet, the coin itself remains unchanged. It is still a small, copper-colored disc with Lincoln's profile on one side and the Lincoln Memorial on the other. Its physical form doesn't betray the drama it has caused or the fortunes it has moved. That's the beauty of rare coins, they carry their value not in their material but in their story, their rarity, and the emotions they inspire. This particular 1982 penny, with its unique characteristics and its record-breaking sale, has secured its place not only in numismatic history but in the broader cultural imagination. The story of the 1982 penny cannot be told without stepping into the heart of the US Mint itself, because to understand how such a remarkable coin could even exist, you need to see the machinery, the processes, and the small moments where human oversight and mechanical imperfection can combine to produce something extraordinary. Imagine the Mint's massive production floor in 1982, the rhythmic clatter of presses, the gleam of conveyor belts, and the constant roar of mechanical motion as millions of planchets move through their journey toward becoming pennies. At the Philadelphia and Denver Mints, the year was already unusual. For the first time in generations, the composition of the penny was changing midstream. Early in the year, the planchets were the familiar 95% copper, 5% zinc and tin alloy, heavier and with a more solid feel. But as summer approached, shipments of new zinc planchets began arriving. These were lighter, composed of 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper, with the copper applied as a thin plating. The goal was for the transition to be smooth, but transitions in industrial processes are rarely perfect. It is in this moment of change that the seeds of rarity are sown. When bins of copper planchets sat next to bins of zinc planchets, when presses were being recalibrated for the new weight and hardness, when die setups were adjusted, the possibility for mix-ups multiplied. A single copper planchet could easily find its way into a batch meant for zinc coins after the official switch date, and if it was struck with dies intended for one of the rarer varieties, perhaps a small date die from the Denver Mint, that coin instantly became something special. The same was true in reverse. A zinc planchet could end up in an early year run meant for copper coins. These are what collectors call transitional errors, and they are among the most desirable errors in all of numismatics, because they represent a tangible moment of historical change frozen in metal. The 1982 penny also carried another layer of complexity, the large date and small date varieties. On the small date versions, the numbers in the year appear slightly thinner and more delicate, with the two curving in a way that gives the whole date a more compact look. On the large date, the numerals are bolder and the 2 is more sharply defined. To the untrained eye, these differences are subtle, but to collectors, they are as distinct as fingerprints. Now, imagine the odds of a rare transitional error being struck on the less common small date variety, in pristine uncirculated condition, with perfect centering and a full, sharp strike. That convergence of factors is what pushes a coin from being valuable to being priceless. At the Mint, every step in the process has a rhythm. Blanking presses punch out discs from large sheets of metal, the edges are upset to form a slight rim, dies are installed and aligned in high-speed presses that can strike hundreds of coins per minute. But no process is immune to error. Dies can clash without a planchet between them, creating marks that transfer to future coins. Planchets can be fed off-center, resulting in partial designs. Sometimes the dies themselves are doubled during preparation, creating a doubling effect in the lettering or numbers that collectors call a double die. If such an error appears on a coin that is already rare due to composition or variety, the result is a numismatic dream, a coin that is unique in multiple ways. The 1982 penny that would eventually sell for $271 million may have been born from just such a chain of improbable events. Perhaps it was a copper planchet struck late in the year with a small date die, perfectly centered, with a subtle but clear doubling in the date and lettering, all preserved in flawless condition because it was never released into circulation. Perhaps it was set aside at the Mint, accidentally or intentionally, finding its way into a drawer or a sample bag where it sat untouched for decades. Or maybe it escaped into the world but was immediately noticed by an attentive collector who placed it into a protective holder before it could gather even a single scratch from there. The coin's life would have been one of quiet reverence. Collectors who were shown the coin would have been sworn to secrecy, knowing that revealing its existence prematurely could attract unwanted attention or pressure. Over the years, its owner might have consulted top experts, each confirming its authenticity and marveling at its uniqueness. Eventually, the decision would be made to bring it into the public eye not through casual sale, but through the grand stage of an international auction. The preparation for such an auction is meticulous. Professional photographers capture the coin in lighting that reveals every contour of Lincoln's face, every line in the Lincoln Memorial, every reflective glint in its immaculate fields. Researchers comb through Mint records to document the historical circumstances of 1982, connecting the coin's features to the broader story of the composition change. Writers craft descriptions that do not just list the coin's attributes but elevate it into a piece of living history. The ultimate transitional rarity, they might call it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the advanced collector. Every word, every image is chosen to convey not just what the coin is, but what it represents. When the auction catalog is released, the coin takes on a life of its own in the numismatic community. Forums buzz with speculation, dealers whisper to their clients, and high-end collectors quietly arrange their finances for the coming bid. The anticipation builds not just because of the coin's rarity, but because of the mystery surrounding its final price. Will it break the record for the most expensive coin ever sold? Will it surpass the realms of art and real estate to stand as one of the most valuable single objects ever purchased by a private individual? The day of the auction arrives, and the atmosphere is electric. Collectors from around the world gather, some in person, some online, each determined to be part of this historic moment. The coin is brought out, displayed under glass, and the bidding begins. The numbers climb rapidly, fueled by years of pent-up desire and the knowledge that this is not just a purchase, it is an act of acquisition that will echo through history. The final hammer price of $271 million does not just set a record, it shatters expectations, rewriting what is possible in the world of coin collecting. After the sale, the coin's legend grows. It is photographed for magazines, displayed briefly at prestigious coin shows under heavy security, and spoken of in hushed tones among collectors. Its new owner may choose to keep it hidden most of the time, revealing it only to trusted friends or fellow enthusiasts who understand the magnitude of what they are seeing. For the rest of the world, it becomes an almost mythical object, a reminder that even the smallest, most overlooked items in our daily lives can hold unimaginable value if the circumstances are right. The story of the most valuable 1982 penny ever found could easily have been written as a Hollywood screenplay, because the drama, the suspense, and the life-changing twist are all there. It begins, not in a bank vault or a professional grading room, but in the simplest of settings, a dusty garage on a quiet suburban street. The garage is cluttered with the remnants of decades, old cardboard boxes, rusted tools, half-empty paint cans, and stacks of forgotten magazines. In one corner, sitting on a shelf so high that it's barely visible, is a large glass jar. The jar is heavy, filled almost to the brim with pennies collected over years, coins tossed there absent-mindedly after trips to the store, found under couch cushions, or picked up from sidewalks. Nobody in the household has touched it in years. One summer afternoon, the jar's owner, a man in his late 50s named Robert, decides to clean out the garage. He lifts the jar down with a grunt, marveling at how much it weighs, and sets it on an old workbench. His plan is simple: roll up the pennies, take them to the bank, and maybe use the cash for a nice dinner out. But as he sits down at the bench and begins sorting, he notices something curious. Some of the coins are bright and shiny, their copper surfaces still gleaming as if they were struck yesterday, while others are darkened and worn. Robert has never been much of a collector, but he's always liked the look of older pennies. As he works, he begins separating them by decade: 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and so on. When he reaches a small pile of 1982 pennies, he remembers hearing somewhere that this was a special year for collectors. Curious, he decides to look up 1982 penny value on his phone. The search results talk about large dates, small dates, copper, zinc, and something about rare errors worth thousands of dollars. Robert laughs to himself, surely none of these could be in his jar. Still, he picks up the first 1982 penny in the pile, feeling its weight in his fingers. It feels different. He can't explain it, but it seems heavier than the others. Out of pure curiosity, he digs through a drawer and finds a small digital kitchen scale. He sets the coin on it, and the number reads 3.11 grams, the weight of the old copper composition. Robert begins checking the date more carefully. The numerals are thin and delicate. Could it be the small date variety the websites mention? He compares it to another 1982 penny and notices the subtle difference in the curve of the two, the positioning of the 8, and the height of the numbers. The excitement in his chest starts to build. He checks more references online, pulling up images of small date versus large date, and each comparison makes him more certain he's holding a copper small date penny, which he reads could be quite rare. But then another thought strikes him: could there be something else about this coin? He goes back to the jar, scanning every 1982 penny he can find, weighing them one by one, setting aside anything unusual. Out of the hundreds of coins in the jar, only one matches the exact feel, look, and weight of this first one. Robert's mind races. He takes the coin into the house, sits under a bright lamp, and examines it with a magnifying glass from his toolbox. The strike is sharp, the surfaces are flawless, and there's a strange doubling in the letters of liberty that catches his eye. Could this be one of those doubled dies he's just read about? Unsure what to do next, Robert calls his old friend Mike, who happens to be a part-time coin dealer. Mike arrives later that evening with his loupe and a small jeweler's scale. The moment Mike looks at the coin, his expression changes. He weighs it, examines it, and then looks at Robert with wide eyes. "Do you have any idea what this could be worth?" he asks, his voice almost trembling. Robert shakes his head, still half convinced it's all just an odd coincidence. Mike explains that this appears to be a 1982 D copper small date penny in pristine condition, a combination so rare that only a tiny number are known to exist. "And this one," he says, "might just be the finest he's ever seen." Over the next few days, Robert follows Mike's advice and sends the coin to a professional grading service. The wait feels endless. Each day, Robert checks his email and mailbox, wondering if the coin has returned. Finally, the package arrives. He opens it carefully, pulls out the slabbed coin, and reads the label, 1982 D1C copper small date, transitional error, MS70. The MS70 grade means perfection, no visible flaws even under magnification. Robert sits back in his chair, staring at the coin in disbelief. The news of the find spreads quickly among serious collectors. Soon, Robert is contacted by an auction house that specializes in rare coins. They want to feature his penny as the star of an upcoming sale. The publicity campaign begins, with high-resolution photographs, press releases, and interviews that turn Robert's quiet life upside down. Reporters come to his house. Television crews film him holding the coin, the jar still sitting in the background like a silent witness to history. People start calling, emailing, even sending letters, hoping to buy the coin before it goes to auction. Robert holds firm. He knows this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and he wants to see it through. On the night of the auction, he sits in the audience, his heart pounding as the bidding begins. The numbers climb higher and higher, surpassing every record in coin auction history. When the final hammer comes down at $271 million, Robert is stunned. The audience erupts into applause. The winning bidder, a reclusive billionaire collector, remains anonymous, represented only by an agent on the phone. After the sale, Robert's life changes overnight. The jar of pennies, now empty except for its legend, becomes a symbol in the coin collecting world. People talk about the jar find in the same way they talk about famous shipwrecked treasures or long-lost artifacts. And somewhere, in a vault owned by a private collector, the world's most valuable penny rests, its tiny copper surface holding within it the story of chance, history, and a summer afternoon in a dusty garage that changed everything. The sale of the $271 million 1982 penny didn't just end with a gavel strike and a transfer of ownership, it sent shockwaves through the entire coin collecting world and far beyond. In the days following the auction, the headlines spread like wildfire. Every major news outlet ran the story. Television talk shows debated it, late-night comedians made jokes about it, and financial analysts tried to explain to the public how a 1-cent coin could command such an unfathomable price. For those outside the numismatic community, the concept was almost unbelievable. But for collectors, it was the ultimate validation, a shining example of how the smallest details, the rarest combinations, and the perfect preservation of history can turn pocket change into a cultural phenomenon. Almost immediately, coin shops and pawn stores saw a surge in visitors. People who hadn't thought about coins in decades suddenly emptied jars from their closets, brought in boxes from their attics, and dumped piles of change onto countertops, hoping lightning might strike twice. The term 1982 pennies skyrocketed in online search rankings. Social media feeds filled with pictures of people weighing their pennies, comparing dates, and asking strangers in online groups if they had something valuable. It was as if the whole country, and soon the whole world, had rediscovered the hidden potential of everyday objects. The impact on the coin market was dramatic. Demand for all 1982 varieties exploded overnight. Coins that had been selling for modest prices before the auction began fetching double, triple, or even 10 times their previous value. Auction houses reported record participation in their sales. Coin roll hunting, once a quiet hobby for a dedicated few, suddenly became a mainstream trend. Videos on YouTube of people searching through bank-wrapped rolls of pennies racked up millions of views, with hopeful treasure hunters eager to find their own miracle coin. Collectors and experts were quick to point out that the $271 million figure was not a standard benchmark for all 1982 pennies. It was a singular event, a perfect storm of rarity, condition, and high-stakes competition among ultra-wealthy buyers. But in the public imagination, the nuance was lost. All people heard was 1982 penny and millions of dollars, and the fever spread. Banks reported unusual withdrawals of penny rolls, sometimes exhausting their supplies for weeks at a time. Small-town coin shows, which had once been sleepy weekend affairs, became packed events where lines formed out the doors. In the months after the sale, the coin's new owner remained anonymous, but rumors circulated about who it might be. Some whispered that it was a tech billionaire with a passion for numismatics, others speculated about a royal family member or a secretive hedge fund manager. Whoever it was, their purchase turned them into a legend among collectors, even without a name attached. At major conventions, the coin was occasionally displayed under bulletproof glass, guarded by security and admired by crowds who leaned in close to see every detail. Photographs never did it justice. In person, the coin seemed to glow under the lights, its copper surface so flawless it appeared almost unreal. The sale also reignited debates within the collecting community about the future of the hobby. Some worried that the focus on extreme high-end rarities would discourage newcomers, creating an impression that coin collecting was only for the ultra-rich. Others argued the opposite, that stories like the 1982 penny inspired more people than ever to look at their change, to learn about mint marks, varieties, and history. For every person who dreamed of finding a multi-million-dollar coin, there were many more who discovered the quiet joy of filling albums, trading with friends, and studying the artistry of their collections. Financially, the ripple effect was undeniable. Prices for other transitional era coins climbed sharply. Collectors began paying closer attention to dates around significant changes in U.S. coinage, such as the 1943 steel cents, the 1965 clad coinage shift, and the 1970 small date. The 1982 penny sale created a halo effect around anything that shared a similar backstory, and for the first time in decades, coin collecting experienced a major boom in both participation and value. The cultural reach of the coin went even further. Documentaries were produced, not just about the 1982 penny itself, but about the broader phenomenon of rare coins and the people who hunt them. Talk shows invited numismatists to explain the difference between copper and zinc, large date and small date. School classrooms used the story as a way to engage students in lessons about economics, history, and metallurgy. Even people who had never cared about coins before found themselves checking the dates on their change before handing it over at a store, and yet, amid all the noise, the coin itself remained silent, resting securely in its protective slab, far from the frenzy it had sparked. Its $271 million sale price was not just a number, it was a symbol, a benchmark that would be referenced for decades to come. It represented the pinnacle of what was possible in numismatics, the rare alignment of historical significance, immaculate preservation, and insatiable collector desire. It became a touchstone in the narrative of rare coins, the example that would be used to inspire, to teach, and to remind everyone that sometimes the most valuable treasures are hiding in plain sight. To understand why the 1982 penny became such a lightning rod for collectors and historians alike, you have to step back into the world of the late 1970s and early 1980s. The United States economy was going through turbulent times, energy crises, inflation spikes, and a shifting global market that put pressure on raw material prices. Copper, the primary metal used in the 1-cent coin for over a century, had seen its market price surge to the point where the actual metal content of a penny was worth more than its face value. By the early 1980s, producing each coin was costing the U.S. Mint more than 1 cent, and for a government minting billions of pennies a year, that was an unsustainable situation. Congress and the U.S. Mint began quietly exploring solutions. Discussions revolved around alternative metals, ways to maintain the coin's size and familiar look while drastically reducing its production cost. The answer came in the form of copper-plated zinc, a core of inexpensive zinc, coated with a thin layer of pure copper so the coin would appear identical to its predecessors. By moving from a 95% copper composition to a 97.5% zinc and 2.5% copper plating, the mint could slash production costs without drawing public backlash for changing the coin's appearance. 1982 became the pivotal year for this transition. For several months, both compositions were struck simultaneously as the mint phased in the new zinc cents while still using up existing copper planchets. But this wasn't a simple changeover, it created a dizzying array of varieties. Between two metals, multiple mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and a few proofs from San Francisco, and differences in date sizes, large date and small date varieties, the total combinations minted in 1982 reached 7 distinct types. Add in minting errors, test strikes, and transitional mistakes where the wrong planchet was used, and the potential for rarity skyrocketed. The process itself was fascinating. At the Philadelphia Mint, blank planchets, circular metal discs, were fed into high-speed presses that struck them with the familiar Lincoln Memorial design. For the copper coins, planchets were cut from large sheets of bronze alloy, while zinc planchets were mass-produced with a thin copper coating already applied. When both types were present in the same facility, it created opportunities for mix-ups, and in coin collecting, those mix-ups are gold. A few zinc planchets were struck with designs intended for copper, and vice versa, producing transitional errors that now fetch staggering prices. The design of the 1982 penny remained unchanged from previous years on the surface, which only added to the intrigue. The obverse front still bore Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln, introduced in 1909 to honor the centennial of Lincoln's birth. The reverse still displayed Frank Gasparo's depiction of the Lincoln Memorial, a design in use since 1959. But beneath the familiar appearance lay an invisible transformation, a shift in the very fabric of the coin's composition that would go unnoticed by most Americans at the time. For seasoned collectors, though, this was an event of monumental importance. They knew the implications. Whenever a coin undergoes a mid-year composition change, the odds of producing rare transitional varieties increase dramatically. And history had proven them right. Other transitional coins, such as the 1943 copper cent or the 1944 steel cent, had become legendary rarities worth tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. The 1982 cents offered not just one potential rarity but several, making them a veritable treasure map for those willing to search. Market conditions in the years following 1982 slowly built the legend. While most 1982 pennies remained common and circulated heavily, a few high-grade examples survived, coins that somehow avoided the scratches, dents, and wear of daily life. Some were set aside by collectors from the start, others slipped into sealed mint sets that preserved their original luster. As grading services like PCGS and NGC rose to prominence in the 1980s and 1990s, these pristine survivors began to stand out, earning coveted MS-68 or even MS-69 grades. Those grades mattered. Each step closer to perfection exponentially increased the value, turning a coin worth face value into something worth thousands, then tens of thousands. The jump from thousands to millions, however, required something more: the perfect storm of condition, rarity, and collector desire. And that's where the $271 million sale comes in. This particular penny wasn't just flawless, it was a unique transitional strike, a coin that defied the odds by being made with the wrong metal in the right moment of history. It was authenticated, certified, and placed into an elite category of coins that only the wealthiest collectors could dream of owning. In the years since, economists have used the story as a case study in perceived value versus intrinsic value. Here was a coin with less than 2 cents worth of metal, yet it sold for more than the GDP of some small countries. The lesson was clear: in collectibles, history, rarity, and narrative can outweigh material worth by astronomical margins. This idea reshaped how people thought about numismatics, not just as a hobby, but as a legitimate form of alternative investment. The irony is that, in 1982, millions of Americans handled pennies without realizing they were living through a historic shift in U.S. coinage. Today, that year is remembered not just for its economic challenges or cultural events, but for a tiny copper-plated artifact that bridged two eras. The 1982 penny is no longer just a coin, it's a symbol of the hidden stories that surround us, a reminder that even in the most ordinary things, extraordinary value can be found if we look closely enough. The psychology of coin collecting is a fascinating lens through which to view the story of the 1982 penny. While casual observers might assume collectors are simply buying and selling metal discs, the truth is that what they're really trading is a combination of history, rarity, personal nostalgia, and the thrill of discovery. In many ways, the 1982 cent embodies all of these elements, which is part of why it ignites such intense fascination among numismatists. Consider the emotional component first. Many collectors alive today remember 1982 vividly. It was a time of cultural change, economic uncertainty, and shifting values. For older collectors, the penny might trigger memories of childhood, of counting coins in piggy banks, of standing in line at candy shops where a handful of cents actually meant something. For younger collectors, it's a gateway into the past, a tangible artifact that links them to events decades before they were born. This blend of personal and historical connection fuels demand far more effectively than raw supply numbers ever could. Then there's the treasure hunter instinct. The knowledge that rare 1982 varieties might still be hiding in everyday circulation is a powerful motivator. Stories circulate in collecting forums and at coin shows of someone finding a high-grade 1982 small-date copper penny in their pocket change, or a zinc transitional error at the bottom of a coffee can filled with loose coins. While the odds are slim, the possibility is real enough to keep people searching, much like prospectors panning for gold. This keeps the 1982 penny in the public consciousness and drives continual interest. From a market standpoint, the 1982 penny has also proven that dramatic price appreciation is possible in numismatics, but only under the right conditions. The $271 million example is an extreme case, driven by a unique convergence of factors. It was not only a transitional error but struck in pristine condition, with flawless surfaces and luster. It also came to auction at a moment when high-net-worth collectors were fiercely competing for iconic U.S. coins, driving prices upward in a bidding war that became the stuff of legend. Auction houses have since studied this sale in detail. It showed that the narrative surrounding a coin can be just as important as the coin itself. The publicity surrounding the 1982 penny inspired other sellers to market their own rare cents with carefully crafted backstories, emphasizing not just the technical rarity but the cultural significance. Coins that might have otherwise sold for modest sums suddenly became star attractions when positioned as part of a larger historical arc. The ripple effects extended beyond U.S. borders. In international markets, dealers reported an uptick in demand for other coins with mid-year composition changes. Canadian cents from 1997, British pennies from the decimal transition in 1971, and even certain Australian coins from the 1980s began to see increased interest. The 1982 U.S. penny effectively educated a generation of collectors about transitional errors, creating a global appetite for similar pieces from other nations. Economists and investment strategists have also taken note. The story has been cited in discussions about passion investments, a category that includes art, vintage cars, rare stamps, and collectible coins. These assets don't generate traditional income streams but can appreciate dramatically over time, especially when tied to strong narratives and finite supply. The 1982 penny became a textbook example of how scarcity combined with cultural relevance can yield outsized returns. At the same time, this surge in interest sparked debate within the coin collecting community. Some traditionalists worried that chasing astronomical prices for a single coin might distort the market, pushing out casual collectors who simply wanted affordable, interesting pieces for their albums. Others argued that high-profile sales brought valuable attention to the hobby, attracting new participants who might start with common coins but eventually grow into serious numismatists. What's undeniable is that the 1982 penny changed the perception of the 1-cent coin forever. Before this, pennies were often dismissed as the most mundane part of U.S. coinage, produced in the billions, scarcely worth the effort to pick up from the ground. After the 1982 phenomenon, the penny became a symbol of hidden potential, a reminder that even the smallest and most common objects can hold extraordinary secrets. The practical effect on collectors was equally profound. Many began to scrutinize their pocket change more closely, learning how to identify the subtle differences between copper and zinc coins, large dates and small dates. Others invested in digital scales precise enough to detect the weight difference between copper cents, 3.11 grams, and zinc cents, 2.5 grams. The tools and knowledge required to identify rare 1982 varieties became standard in collector circles, reinforcing the idea that numismatics is as much about skill and study as it is about luck. In the years since, the legend of the 1982 penny has only grown. It has been featured in documentaries, written about in mainstream financial publications, and discussed in online communities worldwide. Teachers use it as a case study in economics classes to illustrate inflation, commodity prices, and the concept of intrinsic versus market value. Parents pass the story down to their children as a lesson in curiosity and the rewards of paying attention to the details, and still, the hunt continues. Somewhere out there, perhaps in a jar on a kitchen counter or a forgotten roll in a bank vault, other rare 1982 varieties may be waiting to be discovered. Every coin show, every flea market, every estate sale holds the potential for the next big find. That's the magic of the 1982 penny. It turns the ordinary into the extraordinary and transforms the act of looking into a kind of modern treasure hunt. When it comes to identifying a truly rare and valuable 1982 1-cent coin, the process begins with the naked eye but quickly moves into a level of precision work that most casual collectors have never experienced. The trained numismatist knows that spotting a $271 million treasure is not about simply seeing 1982 on the date, it's about knowing the exact interplay between composition, design variety, die characteristics, and condition. The first stage of examination starts with determining the metal composition. The 1982 cents were struck in both copper and zinc, with the copper coins weighing 3.11 grams and the zinc ones weighing 2.5 grams. This difference of just 0.61 grams may sound minor, but in numismatic terms, it's the dividing line between two completely different categories of coin. A collector's digital scale capable of reading to at least 2 decimal places in grams is essential here. For absolute certainty, professionals often use laboratory-grade analytical balances, which can detect weight differences as minute as 0.0001 grams. Visual inspection follows. Under good lighting, copper coins will generally display a warmer, reddish-brown tone, especially when lightly circulated, whereas zinc coins, especially those with copper plating, may exhibit a paler, more orange hue. However, natural toning over decades can blur these color differences, so weight remains the gold standard for determining composition. Next comes variety identification. The 1982 cent exists in large date and small date formats, and within those categories, there are Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mint marks, or the absence thereof. The small date design is characterized by the 2 in the date having a sharper curve and a slightly higher base alignment relative to the 8 in 1, while the large date has a more rounded 2 with a lower base level. In high-value transitional errors, you might see an unexpected combination, such as a small date copper sent from a mint where it shouldn't exist, or a zinc version where only copper was intended. The process becomes more intense when verifying transitional errors. If a coin appears to be struck in the wrong composition for its variety and mint, the expert will conduct further tests, sometimes using X-ray fluorescence (XRF) analysis. This non-destructive method bombards the coin with X-rays and reads the unique energy signatures reflected back, allowing a precise determination of its metal composition without scratching or altering the piece. Authentication also involves die diagnostics. Each working die used to strike coins develops unique microscopic features, tiny die cracks, polish lines, and other markers. If a rare variety is documented in reference books and photo archives, experts will compare these micro details under 10x to 60x magnification using stereo microscopes. This step helps ensure the coin matches known genuine examples and has not been altered from a more common coin. Counterfeits are a real concern. Some fakes are made by altering the date on a common copper cent to read 1982 or by replating a zinc coin to mimic a copper one. Others involve adding or removing mint marks with precision tooling. In extreme cases, counterfeiters have gone so far as to create entirely false dies and strike new coins, though these almost always reveal themselves under microscopic inspection due to incorrect die polish patterns, slightly off font shapes, or inconsistent relief heights. Once a coin passes authenticity checks, it moves to grading. Professional grading companies such as PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, or NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Company, follow a rigorous process. The coin is handled only with gloved hands or soft-tipped tools to avoid skin oils. Multiple graders independently assess it under uniform lighting, noting strike sharpness, luster, color, and the presence of any contact marks or weird grades range from Poor 1, P1, for nearly unrecognizable coins to Mint State 70, MS70, for coins that are flawless even under magnification. For the 1982 cent, the highest premiums are commanded by coins in MS67 and above, as even tiny imperfections can dramatically affect value. The $271 million example was graded at the absolute pinnacle of mint state perfection, free of visible marks, struck with exceptional sharpness, and retaining full original mint luster. Encapsulation follows grading. The coin is sealed in a tamper-proof, sonically welded holder, often called a slab, with a label displaying its grade, variety designation, and certification number. This not only protects the coin from physical damage but also from environmental degradation over time. Market-ready coins are then photographed using specialized numismatic photography setups that capture accurate color and luster without glare. These images become part of the coin's permanent online record in the grading company's verification database, ensuring that potential buyers can confirm its authenticity anywhere in the world. For collectors hoping to find a 1982 rarity, the takeaway is clear: every step in the process matters. A coin's weight, its date and mint mark combination, the specific shape of the numerals, microscopic die details, and the final condition grading all work together to determine whether you're holding a 1-cent piece of pocket change or a multi-million-dollar treasure that could rewrite numismatic history. The auction house was buzzing with an almost electric tension on the day the 1982 1-cent coin came up for sale. Even before the event began, whispers rippled through the crowd. Collectors, investors, and representatives of wealthy private buyers had flown in from around the world. The coin in question had already been the subject of intense media coverage, with rumors of unprecedented offers being quietly floated in private meetings. Everyone knew this was going to be more than just a sale. It was going to be a battle of egos, wealth, and the desire to own a piece of numismatic immortality. The coin itself had been given pride of place in a secure, climate-controlled display case in the center of the preview room. Bathed in soft, museum-quality lighting, the copper luster gleamed with a richness that photographs could never fully capture. The coin's grade and immaculate mint state 70 was clearly displayed, along with its unique variety designation confirming it as the ultra-rare transitional error that had baffled experts for decades. Guards stood nearby, a reminder that this was not just an artifact but an object of staggering financial and historical value. When the bidding opened, the auctioneer wasted no time. The starting price was set at a bold $10 million, already enough to break records for a 1-cent coin, but in seconds, the figure leapt to $20 million, then $35 million, as paddles went up across the room and phones buzzed with live bids from around the globe. Representatives for private collectors in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East were locked in a silent war, their expressions unreadable as they signaled bids with the smallest of gestures. By the time the auction passed the $100 million mark, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. This was no longer about the coin's market value, it was about winning at any cost. The auctioneer's rhythmic chant kept the energy pulsing, but there were long, tense pauses as bidders weighed whether to push forward. Each new increment brought audible gasps from the audience, who realized they were witnessing history. At $200 million, the field had narrowed to just two primary contenders. One was a billionaire tech magnate with a known passion for rare American coinage. The other was an anonymous phone bidder, represented by a seasoned dealer who betrayed no hint of his client's identity. The back and forth was relentless. $205 million, $210 million, $215 million. The increments were no longer small steps, they were leaps, each bid a hammer blow in this battle of financial titans, and then came the moment that stunned even the auctioneer. With the price sitting at $270 million, the anonymous bidder's representative calmly raised his hand and called out, $271 million. The room erupted in murmurs. The tech magnate hesitated, visibly torn between the staggering sum already on the table and the knowledge that this was perhaps the only chance in his lifetime to acquire such a coin. After what felt like an eternity, he shook his head. The auctioneer's voice cut through the air like a gavel, going once, going twice. Sold. The hammer came down, and just like that, the 1982 1-cent coin had set a record that may never be broken. $271 million for a single penny. The crowd burst into applause, some in awe, others in disbelief. In the aftermath, the coin disappeared from public view, whisked away by armored transport to an undisclosed location. Speculation about the new owner's identity ran rampant. Some claimed it was a royal family member from the Middle East. Others insisted it had been purchased for a private museum collection in Asia. The auction house, bound by confidentiality agreements, offered no comment. The sale instantly became the stuff of legend in the numismatic world. Articles and documentaries dissected every detail of the coin's history, its flawless preservation, and the intense bidding war that drove it to such heights. For collectors everywhere, it was a reminder that the humble penny, often overlooked and discarded, could hold secrets and stories worth more than entire fortunes. And so, the 1982 1-cent coin entered its next chapter, not just as a piece of currency, but as a symbol of the extraordinary intersection between history, rarity, and human desire. Its $271 million price tag wasn't just about the metal or the minting, it was about the power of a once-in-a-lifetime treasure to ignite the imaginations, and the bank accounts, of those who dream of owning the rarest of the rare.